You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Count one.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring people, you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military? And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly what
this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position.
I don't know how many more times I have to say this, but I've never seen anything like that before in my life. We're going to bring in our party insiders now for the regular Friday conversation. Greg McEachran is a former Liberal ministerial staffer. Fred Delory is a former Conservative campaign manager. And Melanie Richer is a former communications director for the NDP. We were going to talk about the Ontario election. We were going to talk about the Liberal leadership race. We're going to talk about polling. Greg, that is an insight into what Canada is up against on tariffs, on sovereignty, on all of these things. I mean, just your thoughts on what this says to the world today.
Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona said earlier this afternoon, it looks like the United States, it looks like we've switched sides. And that is my big takeaway from this, in that as long as I've been studying history, following politics, you can look at who the Republican Party used to, adulate people like Ronald Reagan. That element of the party, lots of things to disagree with, but they would never, ever have sided with Russia. And that's what we saw today. I will note that the leading Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee, Senator Mark Warner, who's the vice chair of that, earlier today in an interview with CNN, did draw a line from what happened today to things that have been happening to Canada around those. Yeah. They're going to push us out of Five Eyes, for example. But that was horrific. And especially when you know that those scenes in the Oval Office are usually quite scripted and they have an outcome. With other presidents, there's no way that there's going to be a surprise there. And to see the president and the vice president, with very little military experience, gang up on the president, keeping real reporters out of the room, and having a reporter who's apparently the boyfriend of a Republican congresswoman criticize.
Does Zelenskyy own a suit?
Does he own a suit? Well, the president just showed us there. I'm trying to make. Hopefully, my statistics are correct here, but I believe 43,000 Ukrainian soldiers have died. It's estimated that 200,000 Russian soldiers have died. Probably 12,000 Ukrainian civilians. And in the same breath, the president of the United States mentioned some casualties and then moved on to his approval ratings, wearing a trucker's cap. It is a frightening time.
Yeah, Fred, like 20,000 Ukrainian kids have been kidnapped, taken into, Russian territory. I mean, I'm trying to think of a historical equivalent where something like this could happen. I think like Winston Churchill and FDR, negotiating the Lend-Lease agreement for the Second World War, and Churchill getting berated. I mean, what do you make when you see that kind of a moment?
It was crazy, as you said. It was disheartening. It was like the President of the United States of America is traditionally known as the leader of the free world. Doesn't feel like that leader anymore. It looked like cowardice. The way they bullied Zelenskyy there, the two of them, like J.D. Vance setting off like a little pit bull. It was just so unbecoming of that office as well. They talk about how Zelenskyy acted there. It was them who started all of this. At the end of the day, they're asking Ukraine to give up territory to a foreign invader of a dictator of a monstrous regime that has been a long-time rival, rightfully so, of the United States. So it's just absolutely absurd what we're seeing here, and the rest of the world, free world, needs to step up and fill that vacuum now. We need world leadership at some level to come in and be the new leaders of the free world.
Yeah, Kaja Kallas, who's the former Estonian prime minister and now one of the top diplomatic officials for Europe, is saying we need a new leader of the free world. And, you know, Mel, you look at this moment, like, this was already a controversial thing for Ukraine, right? Because they're going over to sign over $500 billion of mineral wealth, which had the whiff of ransom around it. And it was like they were intent on making Zelenskyy grovel and say thank you repeatedly.
And there was nothing, it seemed, that he could say to have them both back off, right? It was like they were looking for a fight and primed for a fight and ready to have it.
It was like a Twitter argument, you know?
With somebody who wasn't looking to have a Twitter fight, right? Like somebody who's just going about their business, doing what they should be doing. And, you know, you compare the folks in that room. And like, let's take a seat for a little bit. And the way that President Zelenskyy has really led, you know, his country through the last few years has been really remarkable. I think across the planet, everybody has been saying, you know, what a show of leadership, what a show of leadership from Ukrainian people. And then to have this happen, like, I have no words. I don't honestly really know what to say. And the repeated emphasis on, you know, you're not holding your cards as if this is a game. People are dying. Kids, you keep talking about kids, like it's just,
Yeah, when President Trump looked at him and said, you're not winning this, you can't win this, essentially. I mean, it's a remarkable thing when you consider how, you know, Biden was too slow and too incrementalist in sending aid is the big criticism of him, same with Schultz in Germany, but they were there. And I don't know if America's there now for Ukraine or for anybody, certainly not based on the reaction we're seeing, Mel, from European leaders and others.
Totally. And you talk about, you know, right side of history, wrong side of history. I can't imagine how that interaction, or, you know, I'm trying not to think ahead of, you know, what terrifying things could lie ahead, but how does anybody look at that and think, you know what, yeah, that's the right move right now is really hard to comprehend.
Greg, they're right next door, you know, and we're 5-6 weeks into a 4-year presidency, and, you know, there was a lot of outrage when Keir Starmer wouldn't kind of come to Canada's defense yesterday when the UK Prime Minister was in the White House. I think we kind of saw today why Keir Starmer did what he did, right? That provoking Trump in an environment like that was not going to lead anywhere good, and it's a situation now where normally you can speak hard truths to your friends. People seem afraid to speak truth to President Trump.
Yeah, and the easiest thing in the world is to bully someone on your own territory.
Yeah.
And someone who is in a very, very terrible situation. And like a lot of bullies, there's really probably not a lot of personal strength if you stood up to them. But I'm now noticing, you know, where is the, for lack of a better term, the resistance on this? We know that the governor of Maine, in an exchange, said, I'll see you in court. There's been some other ones as well. And I'm hoping this will wake up, you know, I quoted 2 Democratic senators. I'm hoping this does wake up the American opposition. But, you know, you referenced that we're next door. And I, you know, I reference a lot of things that I look at through the lens of demographics. I'm Generation X. We grew up in the 80s. The Soviet Union still existed. The threat of nuclear war was there. It was folded into all of our pop culture, our music, and everything. And we thought we were so far beyond that. And today I kind of made a half joke, you know, discussing this with someone where I'm starting to wonder if we're back to the point of building bunkers in our backyard. This is really frightening, and I have no confidence in that individual who, in the trucker's hat, who just spoke there, that he actually knows what he's doing. And the other scary part is, why is he doing this? You know, we feel like we do not have the whole story. There's been a lot of things alleged, but something is really off here that I think we're right to be nervous and scared.
Yeah, but Fred, everything is a transaction. Like, is what it seems to come down to. Everyone is a client, or everyone is a mark, or everyone is an opportunity, or everybody is a moocher, you know, is sort of, and it seems that it's not about shared values and historic alliances and relationships for countries, it's relationships to him.
Right.
That's it. You know what I mean? It's not about World War II, World War I, Afghanistan, any of that. It's the moment now and a balance sheet that the numbers change every time he speaks.
Yeah, it's really the core of Donald Trump and who he's been his entire career in business. His first presidency was a clumsy, messy, uncertain, didn't know what they were doing. I think he now feels he knows what he's doing. He's been in that office before, and he's running it like he runs the business, where he bullies and manipulates and just pushes, and that's this
It feels more dangerous than the first time.
It's incredibly more dangerous because he seems more intent and feels he's more emboldened to do it, and he's now surrounded by way more people that think like him. Where before, I think he brought in a lot of the seasoned Republicans or whatnot that were around him. They don't have that anymore. It is the fierce fighters that want to just change and break things. We had one of his senior people this week talk about redrawing the Canadian border. We're right next door. It is very serious, and it's going to be what occupies all of the Canadian governments at all levels for the next number of years, well, 4 years anyway.
Mel, we were thinking about, like, how do we even describe this moment? What do you write to set this up? Because what do you even call this, right? And we see this stuff happening with President Zelenskyy, the berating of a wartime leader whose people have lost so much. And underneath that in the American government right now, Elon Musk and these coders are going into departments and cutting off aid, cutting off programs, laying people off. They're firing the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I mean, there is this almost coup-like disruption happening at various levels of the United States. And the Democrats seem to be absent, and the Republicans don't seem to want to try to stop it.
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be any resistance. You both talked about this, like, who stops this from happening? Who is the adult in the room? Who is in charge of all this really quite scary, dangerous stuff? And it doesn't really seem like there is anybody right now that seems to be the voice of reason, honestly. And we talk about, you talked about the, you talked about how you're in a room and you're almost being set up for something, so you want to make sure that you're not taking the bait when you talked about not defending Canada.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we're kind of seeing a two-dance thing of you're trying to appease someone who's not looking to be appeased, but he's also not looking to be, he doesn't want you to not agree with everything you say. But when the goal is taken what he wants to take is what it seems. How do you do that? How do you stand strong? How do you, obviously I'm not being very articulate, but
you can give him everything he wants and it may not matter.
Totally.
It is increasingly what it looks like, right? I mean, Zelenskyy was there, to give away, the mineral resources that he needs to rebuild his country when and if this war ends. And, I had this conversation with the French ambassador last week, and I said, I don't remember us sending a bill to the Americans after 9/11 and after Afghanistan, right? They were our ally, they're a NATO ally, it was an attack on America, and you did what you did. And when you look at this, and I don't say this to criticize the Canadian government, but their response was to voice support for Ukraine today, both the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister. There's no criticism of Trump, and that's just the world that we're in right now, is they got, if they say something, Tuesday is definitely tariff day, if they do, right? It's an impossible fine line.
Yeah, and similar to the conversations around supposed reasons for the tariffs, they're based on lies, falsehoods. In his media availability right there, what he described Putin as Putin wanting peace, where has that been demonstrated? By the invasion?
Wants territory.
And again, going back a couple
Peace on
of
his
days,
terms, right?
Ukraine invited this invasion in somehow, which would, be comparable to the Americans, blaming themselves for the invasion of Pearl Harbor. So you can't even deal with facts here. And if you listened to everything he said about Russia and Putin, none of it is true, and it is all very, it's very much in the form of praise. And it's ignoring facts, so how do you deal with that? This is a fact-free president who is extremely powerful and seems to be very angry that, a president in wartime might show him up in his own office.
Look, we only got about 60 seconds left because there's a lot to get to in the show. We've got the Fentanyls are coming in live for an interview and then other reaction from the U.S. But, Fred, it's destabilized everything. The Canadian political scene is totally destabilized. This seems like the most jarring moment so far, based on what we saw there. I mean, domestically, what ripples do you see coming out of all of this?
Well, every few weeks there's something that's tops what happened the week before. Look, we are heading to an election soon. I think we're heading down that path in 3 weeks' time or whatever, 2 weeks, whatever it is. I think it'll be good that we get certainty with a government after that. That will have to deal with this, right? Because right now we are in caretaker mode, and I'm not criticizing the current government and what they're doing, what they're handling this. But we need a new government or a permanent government for at least 4 years to deal with this for the time that Trump is president.
Yeah.
because it's going to be chaos.
I kind of laugh not because the idea is bad, but Mel, because like I don't know if it matters. I don't like President Zelenskyy, like, to be treated like that after everything his country has endured, and everybody, like, Europe has thrown everything at it, and it just, I mean, does it even matter? Like, who is the prime minister in dealing with what we saw today?
I hope so. I think a lot of people hope so, because it's terrifying.
Yeah, Greg, what do you think?
The
quickly?
Prime Minister of Britain is not even a year elected, and it didn't matter in his dealings. So I'm not sure it does matter. I do, we saw this coming in 2023. There were lots of Republicans that were starting to question Ukraine. There was a little blip in Canadian politics, and I'll try to stay, avoid the partisan here at the end of 2023 around things like Operation Unifier and free trade. I hope that is done and dusted, and that Canadians are united on this. And I hope there's a damn big protest in front of the Russian embassy this weekend.
Yeah, that was quite a day. Look, maybe next Friday it'll be back to normal, but no promises. Thanks for being here, Fred Delory, Greg McEachern, Melanie Richet.